So I'm planning to show LCS in an RK operated eye. And we all understand that the challenges are there with, I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, you are perfect.
Okay, thanks. So challenges, of course, of biometry, these RKIs are the most challenging. And then, then most importantly, since we are in a session where we are all discussing the synergies and the eye-enhanced lenses, the choice of IOLs, because many of these patients will be looking for a premium IOL and some near ability. And then you have the radial corneal incisions, which can, cause confusion. And if sometimes if you're faced with too many of them, deep chambers, maneuvering in the eye can be more challenging because your incisions may give way. And overlocking of the incisions can cause these incisions to open up. And the IOL injection is often the time when you've gone through with the surgery effortlessly, but when you inject the lens, these incisions may open up because of the pressures of the injector. And then in femto assisted surgeries also, there may be difficulty with the docking and also the possibility of rhexis tags. In fact, when we started doing femto, RK was actually one of the contraindications. Today, I prefer to do femto in all my RKIs because it actually gives us a lot of advantages, which I'll talk about. So there is this lady, 61 years old, had RK almost 30 years back in both eyes, and is wearing a small hyperopic correction with small astigmatism. And she was keen for good distance vision and some ability. She has a significant cataract and some ability at near or intermediate if possible. And she likes to do her part. So she said that, Doctor, my part kar lu bas apna, which means that she was looking at a little bit of intermediate. So I had to think accordingly. So here was the pentacam of this patient, and showed fairly okay flat corneas. The astigmatism was not very high. And of course, you have to look at this very carefully if you're planning anything like a multifocal lens. And on the Lenstar, we did the Barrett's True-K formulas. Here, the astigmatism was in the similar range. And we were doing the left eye, I think. And here is the surgery, which I thought I'll show you. So I think a lot goes into the biometry. We have to be careful. I tend to use the ASCRS calculator a lot, and we tend to use the Pentacam EKR reports and the OptoView posterior corneal measurement. So we get 4 or 5 different. I've not played it yet, so it's okay. So we tend to get those in hand, and RK is always the most challenging. So here we are doing a femto, and this patient, the docking can be a little troublesome because the contours of the cornea are changed. And these are high myopic eyes where the limbal anatomy can be a little different. So you can see that as soon as I started doing the scan, it said that, the scan was, it was showing that there was a problem with the scan. Let me just pause you here. It says cornea posterior fitting is not correct. And in going on, I think it also tells you that the limbus detection. So this is very often seen with very high very flat corneas, and it does not detect the limbus very well. Going on, we continue with the scan. You have to omit these errors and continue with the scan. You can rescan it if you're not getting the right things at all, but here you will have to manually change the setting. So you can see here that I'm moving this down because it was detecting the posterior cornea in a different way for a normal cornea. Here it's a centrally very flat cornea. So I'm first changing these contours, and then also on the other scan, and then both of them, once they are done, I will be moving the gates for detection of the posterior cornea in the transverse and the sagittal and the corneal planes. And then once that is done, now you have them relatively in the right place, and the anterior one was almost in the right place as well. The other challenge is now going to be getting the cornea, the limbus right, because it's not detecting the limbus correctly. So I'll go on and set the limbus. And for that, this is the posterior lens, and then the pupil, and then going on to the limbus. It's detecting the limbus to be way inside. So I'll have to move the limbus out. Otherwise, we'll be in a situation. So you can see here that I'm enlarging the limbus to come to very close to where it is. Once that is done, since I'm not planning limbal incisions anyway on my surgery, it's not going to matter too much. I don't like to do the femto incisions on RKIs. And we are not planning any LRIs. So it's again okay to leave the axis fine. Now here, rest of it is mostly the usual femto planning as we would normally do. And of course, I've also changed the energies for the capsular rhexis because I don't want any tags. So I've increased the energy a little bit there. So although it will not probably make so much of a difference, but here we are able to complete this. And once this thing is over, the suction is released. And then we move the patient to the operating room. So here I'm making, you can see that I'm making a posterior limbal incision. In fact, I'm going through the conjunctiva and you have to choose the position of your surgery very well. I've already made 2 side ports, also choosing them to be between 2 incisions here and 1 between 2 incisions here. So I first make the side ports. I kept it edited because I didn't want to have a very long surgery here. And then I don't put viscoelastic from the side ports. I inject, either BSS or 0.1 lignocaine or sometimes phenocaine, because phenocaine also works very well if the pupil is small. And then I make a main incision. And I'm using this nice microrhexis forceps, which I've worked with Epsilon and designed. Again, no financial interest, but it allows you to see through it. So it works very well through side ports and through all other incisions. It's a 21 gauge. And you can see here that removing the rhexis can be a challenge. So I try to tear it just like you would do in a rhexis. And however, as I reached this area, I found that it was beginning to tear incorrectly. So it started coming in because of the tags over the edge. So I started from the other side, and you can see how I'm going through with the rhexis from the opposite side. And now 99% of the cases will have a free floating, but in RK eyes, you have to be very careful, because if you pull it incorrectly, so I was able to bring it around and I was able to complete the rhexis where it was intended, and then you can do a gentle hydrodissection. Now, some people might be scared that these rhexis will not be strong. I have experience of almost 50 plus RK eyes where we've done a femto-assisted cataract surgery, and luckily, so far, I don't have a broken rhexis. And the rhexis, doing the rhexis with the femto is very good here, because it minimizes the manipulations inside the eye, which you would do if you were doing a rhexis manually. And in RK eyes, it's best to have as little manipulation. So if your nucleus is cleaved, everything is done, the duration of surgery and the amount of time spent inside the eye is very small. So obviously the maneuvering inside the eye is also very small, because your lateral separation is not required. So the stretching of the wound will be less. That's the best part about doing a femto-assisted surgery in these RK eyes. And you can see that I've done a 6-quadrant crack, and the cracks are already there. So my time inside the chamber will be minimized. My time, the number of manipulations inside the eye will be minimized. For example, if you had a hard cataract, you would not be doing so much lateral separation. So for me, in RK eyes, this is a natural first choice, and I convince patients to opt for a femto-assisted surgery. Even if they're using a cheaper lens implant, it doesn't matter. They can still opt for a femto-assisted surgery. And having these quadrants separated, you just have to use almost no energy. And you can probably see that I'm using the Signature Pro, and my bottle height is just about 40 centimeters. I work on very low infusion pressures now, and you can see the chamber stability. I also use calibrated instruments. So if you can see, my chopper is different. My ports are made to just about 22 gauge, and this chopper fits into a 22 gauge. So there is almost no leakage of fluid. That's what allows me to have good chambers and low bottle heights. So these calibrated incisions, I've had specially designed choppers, again from Epsilon, where we are able to get these choppers made to the size of incision that we like to use. And this minimizes the amount of fluid loss. So while the good machines are very, very important, so the Signature's fluidics are amazing, that it allows me to work at just a 40 centimeter height, which is equal to 25 millimeters of IOP. Which is very, very low IOP. But you can see that the chamber stability, even when using high vacuum, is very, very good. I'm not having any chamber collapse. And the cutting ability of these new tips is fantastic. So I've been really enjoying the Signature Pro for that matter, and is my favorite machine today. So once these eyes are done, you can see that I'm not moving my phaco tip at all, because if I move it around too much, my incision is going to open up. Not that it won't open up otherwise, but it can still open up. But now we're going to do with these. So these are specially designed bimanual tips, again, which are both sandblasted. Dr. Ramamurthy showed you that the aspiration port was sandblasted. I have both tips sandblasted. These are again specially designed to fit in from a 22 gauge or a 21 gauge incision. I have both sizes depending on what side port I'm going to use. So this again minimizes. You'll see that while my main wound is leaking now because one of the incisions had opened up a little bit, my side ports have absolutely no leak, because these instruments are perfect fits for my side ports. So they are calibrated to each other. And both my tips are sandblasted, so that I can use either of them to polish. And frankly, I don't like to polish at all with the aspiration port. I like to polish with the infusion port, because it has the advantage of the fluid running all the time. So when the fluid is running all the time, even if you're polishing, you will never end up breaking the posterior capsule, because the PC is always being pushed away by the running fluid from the irrigation handpiece. With the aspiration port, if you try to polish and your aspiration is on, you might catch the PC, and then you might even rupture it or kind of snip it there. But if you're polishing with the infusion handpiece with the infusion running, there is almost no chance of you to, unless you really want to go and break it, you will not break the PC at all. So then switching hands, and The other advantage is that when both are finely sandblasted, you can do the polish with either of them. So if I want to use the aspiration handpiece, I will use it, but my first choice would obviously be the infusion handpiece to polish. And again, no financial interest, but these are working extremely well on the Signature Pro. So if and they are made of a situation where the caliber of the aspiration, it's a high flow handpiece basically, because it's made of very thin walled irrigation handpieces, and especially designed for working very well with different machines. So there the thing is gone, and now is the critical time. I do a hydroimplantation usually, and you can see that my incision is already gaping. I've made a 2.2 enlarged to 2.5, and you can see that I'm doing a wound assisted. I'm not even going inside the wound. I'm trying to minimize the amount of manipulations there, and keeping my injector and the cartridge out as much as possible. Yet this incision is opened up, and it is going to require, frankly, I didn't have any space. All these incisions were so close to each other that I did not have a single window. I could have done a scleral tunnel, which I don't enjoy doing. So in those rare instances where my wound opens up, and the reason I showed you this today was this: I've implanted Eyehance lens here. This patient was looking for intermediate vision, and we had a fairly reliable biometry. So I decided to go with an Eyehance. Now, Eyehance is ideally suited for post-refractive surgery cases because it does not have any rings, and yet our patients are very happy with their intermediate ability, which is slightly better. So it's a monofocal plus, and these have almost completely replaced my monofocal practice now, because they are very forgiving for all these challenging situations where the optics of the eye may not be perfect. So they tend to, our numbers on the monofocals have almost gone away with once Eyehance is around. And here now I'm planning to suture the wound. So I've put in air to just see that I don't get significant astigmatism when I tighten my sutures. And since we are running short of time, I'll take you through the suturing bit. Almost everybody knows how to suture them, but you can see that I've taken it in such a way that it's supporting the incision and supporting the radial incision as well. Once I hydrate my wounds, I check with my index finger, Dr. Blumenthal taught us, and this is my technique of doing the trypan blue Seedles test. I've been doing this for almost 7-8 years now. It tells you if there's a small leak of aqueous, and if it is, then you can go back and seal it. It seems to be doing well. So this patient did fairly well, and you can see that I've checked all my 3 incisions, and if I notice a leak, I would stop it there. So she did fairly well, 6.9 unaided and N12, and had a very small refractive error, small astigmatism. She was fairly satisfied. She wanted a second eye immediately. The problem was the second eye has some astigmatism more than this, almost about 1.7. So it's going to be a challenge. I do use torics for RK-operated eyes as well, but then Eyehance doesn't come in a toric version. So I'll have to decide what I want to do. Cautions, we'll talk about them. So I think I've been able to show some pearls.